Hey, look at that. We're live. It's great to be here. And listen, you've seen the title. You're probably interested in what I'm going to talk about today. Here we are to talk about why GPT-4o Mini is a massive, massive deal, why it matters. There's so much for us to talk about today on the show. Welcome to AI Mistakes. I'm Daniel Lemire. We're here to talk about the big drop that happened last week. That's right. I'm talking about last week's news this week on the channel because I've had some time to think about what's been happening in the world of AI. And it's been a pretty wild week. You might be asking yourself, why is Daniel picking on this thing to talk about this week? I mean, that's kind of last week's news. And you're not wrong. I mean, we could be talking about the big Llama 3 drop. We could be talking about the new Mistral model. We could be talking about all kinds of exciting and wonderful things that are happening in AI. But this is the thing that I've picked. And I have a pretty good reason for picking on this particular thing because I think that there are probably some folks in the community that are missing what's going on behind the scenes with GPT-4o Mini, and I need you to know what's going on. So we're going to talk about this emerging change that's coming our way by virtue of GPT-4o Mini. Now, I'll just be straightforward and honest and tell you that I have not spent an abundance of time with GPT-4o Mini, but I have worked with it a little bit. And honestly, overall, I've been pretty impressed with what I've seen. I think that this is a great development for the community. I'm not sure what it means in terms of the survivability of the free channel for ChatGPT. I think that's an interesting development. You know, if you've been a regular user of ChatGPT at all and you're on the free model, you might have noticed that the availability of the models has changed. With this release this week, what's happened is that it's no longer possible to use ChatGPT 4o without a paid account. So that's kind of an interesting development. And I think it's something that is really worthy of our consideration and thought because where we are today is that the pricing has dramatically changed. And this is something that is relevant to us in a couple of different ways. You know, when we think about the changes that OpenAI has been going through, the other piece that you need to realize is that the speed of these models matters a whole lot for a lot of reasons. So when we bring together the speed change, the raw speed of GPT-4o Mini, 202 tokens per second, that is an incredible amount of throughput. And when you compare it to the likes of Claude and Gemini, it's faster. It's twice as fast as 3.5 turbo. What does that speed really mean? Well, it also has an impact on cost because this new 4o Mini model is dramatically different in price. It means that the cost equations behind the utilization of this new model, as well as what it takes to put it through the infrastructure, also matters. So what we're really talking about here is a major efficiency delta. What does that mean? OpenAI is combining the advancements in speed and the advancements in the cost to run, and they're taking full advantage of it. What do I mean? Well, when you are running this as a service, there's a couple of elements that you have to keep in mind. OpenAI is paying not only for the training costs in building the model, but they're also more than pretty much anything else. In order to run ChatGPT, it's the inference cost that matters. And one of the things that we're seeing is that because the cost equation is dramatically different for this new model, you can see in the card, in the costing of this model, that things are way different. The cost of using GPT-4o Mini as compared to all of the other models is dramatically cheaper. In fact, it is so dramatically cheaper. We're talking about orders of magnitude. And if that's what they're charging us to use it, that also means that they are having a major development in a drop in cost for running the service. And that's one of the things that really matters. That's one of the factors I want to talk at length about today, because the other news headline that we've had this week is the financial situation that OpenAI is in. In fact, we know that they're in kind of a difficult place right now in terms of dollars. If you look at the amount of money that they're spending on inferencing costs, the amount of money that they're spending on model costs, particularly model training, that is their highest expense. And then, of course, the payroll for the 1,200 or some odd people that they have working at OpenAI. And of course, in order to run this new enterprise that they've been working on for several years, there are fixed costs that they have to control. Those employees that they've brought in to run the services and enable all of the capabilities, the projects and the programs that they're building, those are major costs that are fixed, and they don't go away unless you make a major change to your staff. But when it comes to the model training and the inferencing cost, those are levers that they have the opportunity to pull. Now, I don't have inside knowledge to understand what this cost sheet means, okay? And let's just be straight. I would expect that the cost to you and I for using these services is going to be profitable for them, in terms of they are spending less to run the model inference for you than they are charging for you out the door. And if we're talking about, fractions of a penny, that means that their costs have to be less than that to run. And we know that with the release of GPT-4o mini, the speed has gone up, and that means it's also spending less time running on that GPU. So when you bring those things together, we're talking about an efficiency that is more than a step change. So they're able to provide those reliable services through the API. They're able to run a lower end model. And we've seen this as a trend. I mean, if you look at where things have been going, Google has released a mini model, Anthropic has released a much smaller model. We're even seeing some real optimizations coming out of the likes of Microsoft and how they're doing optimization across the training and the inferencing. So we know that there are definitely some things that are happening in the background. We also know from the information that we've seen from the likes of NVIDIA that the efficiency behind the scenes in how they're running this actually on the hardware continues to get more efficient as well. There's a lot of levers that we have to pull. And one of the things that's happening with these services is they're changing the models, they're changing the infrastructure, they're changing every element of these large language models that we get to work with. And so they have a lot of levers to pull. And what we've seen over really more 2024, after the release of GPT-4o, there's been a lot of things that OpenAI has been tweaking on the back end of things. So I think what we're actually beginning to see here is some real optimizations. There's been a lot of developments in that optimization selection that they have to work with, the way that they can charge it, the way that they can serve it. They've also had to continuously expand services to account for the likes of enterprise users. A lot of the features and developments that OpenAI is going after right now are things that are not directly tied to improving the model. There's been rumors about the capabilities of GPT-5. We know they're working on GPT-5 in the background, but there's also been no word of direct access or people seeing the results out of GPT-5. And there's a lot of conspiracy theories about what's going on there. We know that OpenAI had GPT-2, 3, and 4 for quite a long time before they talked about it publicly, before they let anyone get access to it. I think we're in kind of the same situation today where they're working on solving other problems that allow them to have a sustainable business. And just because we see published information about what their model costs are today, what their run costs are, they're not giving us all of the details. So we don't have the complete picture of what OpenAI is working on. But I think, the thing that I'm thinking about most as it relates to the moves that OpenAI has been making lately, They are trying to stay ahead of things in just the right ways, and they see where things are going. Another area where there's some critical movement that's been happening is in the mobile space. If you've seen the news of late, you know that Apple's been working on some capabilities that are going to run locally on their phone. They've really taken the time to do some additional development work that allows them to run a smaller model on that hardware of the device. And so this is also a necessary strategic move by OpenAI. And they have the opportunity to build a reputation for the model, make it smaller, make it more efficient. It's actually solving multiple different problems that OpenAI has. And, look, I'll be honest, I'm not using ChatGPT all day, every day like I was 6 months ago. I'm using other solutions a lot more frequently, so they're also getting the benefits of my subscription without the same level of utilization. I am still using it quite a bit, but my usage has dramatically shifted over the last couple of months. But I wouldn't be surprised to learn that their workload has continued to increase, especially with the adoption of enterprise clients and the like. Some of the news articles that I read this week, and I could pull it up and put it on the screen, but this isn't the direction I want to go with the overall conversation. So I'm just going to hit this point real quick. We know that OpenAI has multiple partnerships with large organizations. In the last couple of days, in fact, today, there was some tweets put out by Andrew Curran, who is one of the employees at OpenAI, talking about the work that OpenAI have been doing with multiple different parties, particularly in the financial space, to develop proprietary models that are in direct support of people in the finance industry doing the work that they do. So what you and I see inside of ChatGPT is really not the entire picture of what OpenAI is working on. And if there's anyone out there that understands how essential it is to have that regular revenue coming in to fund the business, it's Sam Altman. A lot of the discussion we had last year about the board and the way that OpenAI is structured, Elon Musk being an early investor in OpenAI was very unhappy with some of the business structural changes that happened, and particularly with the agreements that were taken up with Microsoft, because it took an organization that was intended to be entirely a nonprofit and it turned it into an enterprise that could be profitable. And look, there's a lot of really big personalities involved with this kind of program, whether it's Sam Altman or Elon Musk, Ilya, and some of the folks that have been in and out of OpenAI. They have done a lot of really critical work, and I don't think anybody that's been involved with OpenAI thinks that OpenAI is not doing the work day in and day out. I mean, for goodness sake, they launched ChatGPT, which has really changed the discussion to a greater deal. And what I really anticipate here is that OpenAI is not going to stand on the sidelines. They're going to continue to take steps to put themselves in a much better position. And they're also pulling all of the levers that they have to do that. Here's another great example of what I mean by that. When we opened up the door to ChatGPT 4o, one of the things that they did is they made the model a lot smaller. They kept it multimodal, but it's not multimodal in the same way that GPT-4o was. In fact, GPT-4o had some additional capabilities like being able to work with video. And that's no longer available with the GPT-4o mini model. But the reality is the consumption, the investment in compute resources that are necessary, this is a trade-off. And they've made a very conscious decision to change what exactly you can run through that API. Now, they have shared with us that the plans for the model, the mini model, is to incorporate some of those other modalities that are missing today. So that's a part of the plan. But also, if you're burning a lot of money on inference costs, it makes a great deal of sense to fundamentally change things. One of the things that I got excited about a few weeks ago, can you believe it? It was only a few weeks ago. OpenAI changed the free model and opened up GPT-4o on the free accounts. So everyone had access to the absolute maximally effective model that OpenAI produced. And already we've seen that they've shifted to mini. And I think there's definitely some things that are going on behind the scenes There's some evaluation, there's some load testing. They are really working hard to put themselves in a better position, and they're using all of the levers at their disposal to do that. So what I think is going on behind the scenes is they're testing out some new capabilities. They're constantly changing and shifting things. And that's exactly what you and I should expect from the likes of a startup organization. The changes that they've made to the free tier are not to be dismissed either, because what this change does for them by switching everyone that is on the free tier to the mini model, it's allowing them to more deeply test that mini model, right? Because that is also a part of the work that they're doing, but they continue to give away that capability that lets users be exposed to the very effective model that they make available without giving up the opportunity to make those trade-offs. What's really cool about the free service that they're offering here is that it is something that opens the door to a lot of possibilities for you and I. And one of the big announcements this week that followed this shift to GPT-4o mini that I'm personally excited about is that in the developer accounts, you're actually able to develop your own model using many millions of cycles to do that. And it doesn't cost you anything. Now, this is a limited time thing, but basically through September, OpenAI is allowing you under a developer account to train your own models. And this is something that was not free and is quite a bit of work to do. Now, this is where I get into a little bit of the geekery. I'll be honest. Probably not everybody watching the channel is going to be interested in developing their own model. And you might be a little bit intimidated by this concept of developing your own model. Well, the reality is developing your own model doesn't have to be complicated. It can actually be really quite simple. And if you want to become maximally effective with the use of AI, this is actually a pretty safe space for you to get into. Now, I haven't made any videos about developing models, but through the wonders of the likes of YouTube, it's probably not terribly difficult to find a channel that is covering the development of your own model. There's probably multiple tutorials online. And I've got a newsletter update that's coming out towards the end of this month. It's very likely to be something I'm going to put in the newsletter. So if you're not already signed up for the newsletter, take a look at the description, and I'll update the description immediately following the video to give you direct links to the newsletter so you can find that and learn a little bit more about developing your own model. Because until September, you and I can go and leverage OpenAI's GPT-4o mini model to develop your own model. What does that mean? It means that you can define a very specific use case that solves a very specific need for you, and it's not going to cost you anything to develop it. That's pretty incredible. And that's one of the amazing things about these developments with the AI capabilities and the models that we have access to. We're at a day and age where pretty much anyone that has the desire can develop an AI based application and really provide services. That's pretty incredible. Now, there is a lot that OpenAI has done. They have a track record of absolutely quashing other startups that are putting a wrapper around the leveraging of the GPT models. But here's the reality: they can't cover everything. They're going to continue to find places where it makes sense for them to introduce themselves into the market. And that's another news item, right? If you haven't seen the news, the big thing that happened today is Search GPT. What that means is that they put out a prototype that's going to let them essentially compete with the likes of Perplexity and Google, leveraging search results in the responses. And this is an area of opportunity for them. Now, I'm going to go a little conspiracy theory on you here, and what I suspect is going on here is that there's multiple different approaches that OpenAI are taking this. I think they understood the value of search all along, but they held off in going after that until they could get things into a much more controlled situation. You have to be able to run very quickly and effectively to leverage a responsive application that does search. One of the reasons why I find Perplexity to be such a delightful tool to use is it's very fast. You have to be able to go retrieve those search results, hand that off to the large language model for it to compose the answer to you, all the while you're waiting. And look, we are very accustomed to a speed of search that is very, very short. I was around in the days before we had Google. And if you want to know a little bit more about what it was like before we had Google, I can recommend Donald Norman's book, The Design of Everyday Things. In that book, he actually talks about we've come to the end of the phone book method with Yahoo, and we don't know what's going to come next. Donald Norman wrote that book before Google really reached any level of maturity that you and I could know about, because there was a day that Google was a startup. And one of the big things that Google did was they really made it fast to search the internet. So it wasn't just what are you searching for, and you could type that in, but it was also that it was able to deliver those results at a speed that was really delightful for the user. And that fundamentally hasn't changed. So I do think that the mini model that OpenAI has introduced here is absolutely a part of this Search GPT prototype. I can't prove it. I don't have any data. And while I've signed up for access to Search GPT, I'm not likely to be among the first in the group that get access to it. But I am interested, and this is yet another potential revenue stream that OpenAI is developing. And it's an important development to consider, because what is actually happening here is OpenAI are trying to pull all of the levers that they can, because it may mean their survival is at risk if they can't continue to deliver and earn the dollars that they need to keep things running. They're going to have to find more external investors. And I know that they're trying to do that as well. I'm pretty confident that OpenAI is going to be around. I don't think that we're anywhere near the end of the story. And I think what we're going to learn with the partnerships across big financial organizations is, in a worst case scenario, OpenAI gets absorbed into some other endeavor. What could that be? I couldn't possibly speculate on that. But I think that OpenAI is going to survive in one way, shape, or form in perpetuity. There's just too much value here to be reaped. But when you look at what they've done to bring the optimizations to this mini model, these scores are really pretty good. I mean, they're basically number two across all of these areas, with very rarely an exception. The biggest one here, the outlier, the place that it's different, is Math Vista. And we had another big headline this week around math and what Google developed. That's a pretty exciting development that I need to go learn some math things before I can talk in depth about the big thing that happened with Google research this week in the math models. But when you look at the scores and see how well it is, I think this is a very good trade-off for OpenAI to make. Yes, we could be grumpy about, well, they changed 4o, they took it away from the free tier and gave us mini instead. But the results are really quite good. And there's one thing that I've learned working with these models is your mileage is going to vary anyway, okay? When we look at the paper that was put out by the likes of Ethan Mollick and the other professors across the world at MIT and Wharton and some other very well-known prestigious university for studying capabilities across technology and business, what we see is that the ability of these large language models, the foundation models, really varies across a number of different areas. Not every use case is really great for using with these AI tools. And so if you can get a score that's approximately close, you're still going to be able to do a whole lot of things for those use cases that make a great deal of sense. And it's not going to fix the problems that we have with the use cases that simply don't work. Of course, that won't stop people from trying to use it that way. But the reality is that we have to develop practices that are reliable despite the lack of reliability from the model results. And we've been talking about this quite a lot in some of the communities that I'm a part of. What's particularly interesting to me right now in looking at what's happening across the space is there's a lot of discussion about retrieval augmented generation. The search capability that they're bringing to bear. OpenAI has already said that it does include some RAG capabilities. Being able to pull in all of that data has to be a part of it. And the only way that you can do that is by being able to calculate and understand those external documents when you're bringing them in to the inferencing session. But I also think that context windows are another major part of the discussion. And that's another big change that has occurred with GPT-4o mini. When we look at the context windows, that's another big change. It's 128,000 tokens, which is, I think, more than double, if not quadruple, what we were getting with GPT-3.5 Turbo. So again, they're continuing to improve the model, both in terms of how fast it is, the level of its capability, how expensive it is to run, and I think these all make a great deal of sense. And it's why I'm really excited about what they have done with GPT-4o Mini and why I think this is a bigger deal than people are really making it out to be. And of course, you can always go out there and find a benchmark. I do think the benchmarks are relevant, but certainly a lot less relevant than they used to be, simply because a lot of these now are being gamed. We understand many of the questions that are going to be on the test, and they're able to take advantage of that sort of foreknowledge in developing these applications. But it's that way across the board. So they're all comparing to each other, and I think that's a relevant thing for us to continue to do. We have access to a lot of these models at a very low cost, right? Like Gemini Flash is very inexpensive to use. Claude Haiku is very inexpensive to use. So you have options for where you can run your inferencing and compare the results. And I'm constantly doing that. This week, when Llama 3.1 came out, I went in and changed Perplexity to Llama 1. I immediately changed it back to Claude 3.5 because I was not happy with the results I was seeing with Llama 3.1. And I'm not here to bash on really any of the providers. I think there are really great things that are happening across the board at every one of these top tier large language model foundation providers. Anthropic has made some incredible strides, and I'm really impressed with the work that they're doing. You can't count out Google because they've got not only Mother Alphabet, but they've got Google Research and DeepMind that are constantly contributing cutting edge research to the space. And we can't dismiss Google because they practically invented the transformer model methods that are making all of this possible. And OpenAI, well, I mean, they're the founders of ChatGPT. I mean, they're the reason I'm on YouTube right now having this conversation with you, because it blew up and it was immediately apparent to me what the value was in leveraging these capabilities. What's interesting is I was in the developer access to OpenAI. I had access to the early models. One of the things they've got in here was, how much the cost per token has dropped since DaVinci 3. And I was in there using Text DaVinci 3. And I'll readily admit that, while I was playing with it, I didn't really get it. I didn't connect all of the dots in the ways that this could be used. In many ways, ChatGPT was kind of an accident for OpenAI. And if you've read the backstory on this is it almost didn't happen. They kind of debated about releasing it at all. But this core chatbot capability where you just talk to it really changes a couple of critical things. And that's where I want to leave the conversation with you tonight as I'm closing out the time with you. A couple of thoughts that I want to put out there. One of the things about increasing the speed of the results that you get out of the model and significantly dropping the cost really changes the game. What do I mean by that? Well, there are a lot of real-time situations that we are in where the timing matters. Phone support is one of those, right? If you want to have a phone conversation, if the person on the other end doesn't answer after a short period of time, you know there's something not right about that conversation. And what we've already seen with what OpenAI has shared with their voice interaction, that with the Omni model, the whole point was, hey, it integrates voice natively. Now, they have not released the mini model that includes that voice capability. That's one of the emerging areas that they have to work on. But I wouldn't be terribly surprised to learn that this real time capability that is being incorporated through the power of Omni, because it's a much lower cost and it runs much more effectively, it's going to totally change what's possible and what organizations are going to try to use these models for. I think phone conversations and phone support is absolutely one of those critical spaces that will benefit from these faster execution models. We're also going to see a real breakout in the coming months for using these capabilities on a mobile device. Now, what might that look like for OpenAI? That's an outstanding question. I don't know that there's any clear answers. I also don't think that we're going to see things overnight change to it's on your phone running around with you. They are going to continue to create a value proposition around running it on cloud services. And there are definitely times and places where that makes sense. I do think that we'll begin to see some of the core features like image and text move to a mobile device. But when we talk about what's possible with these models, when you can do question and answer sessions lightning fast, you can ask multiple questions, you can begin to do a totally different kind of modeling. One of the cool things that I learned about a number of years ago was running a Monte Carlo simulation. Now, if you've seen some of the really advanced prompting techniques that you can do with a large language model, you know that you can actually run a Monte Carlo simulation in the ChatGPT. It actually will do that work for you using the data and analysis tool set. And that's one of the areas that's kind of different. I'm still very excited about the capabilities of leveraging all of that behind the scenes that ChatGPT allowed us to do with data, right? Changing the scenario for a data scientist and letting people like me do things that would typically require a data scientist has absolutely been amazing. But think about it as a Monte Carlo simulation, but in terms of having an interaction with a large language model, now you can ask multiple questions. You can do scenario discussions. You can think about planning things, and you can actually launch a series of questions and then put something in front of that that evaluates those questions. We're talking about being able to build an AI based application that doesn't require a master prompt engineer to get everything right in a single shot. In fact, as the prompt engineering discipline continues to evolve, we're increasingly seeing the use of large language models to optimize prompts for us. So it's going to be possible, if not already today, to leverage these rapid speed, low cost inferencing capabilities to self optimize the prompts. You can actually try many different variations of a prompt, evaluate the quality of those responses with another large language model interrogation, and choose the best one. And it probably won't take any longer than what we're used to seeing with the likes of GPT-4o. So if you're thinking about getting started with leveraging this capability, you're going to be able to try things that you might not have considered simply from the sheer speed. One of my favorite applications of these high speed models is real time. You could actually have it listen to your microphone, go out and do a search, and while you're having that conversation, it's coming back with results. When I was in college, one of my favorite things to do in one of the courses, we had an emerging technology course. It was my absolute favorite in grad school. But in that course, we were actually in a lab, a computer lab environment. We had computers that were actually there in front of us during the class that we could use. I didn't even have to bring my laptop in. I had a lab provided computer that I could work with. And I was able to do Wikipedia and other Google related searches during the lecturing, so that if there was something during that lecture that I didn't quite understand, I could do a real time lookup of that thing. That's something that's now possible for all of us with the power of AI today. And not only are you able to do those kinds of lookups, but with it able to go out and do the RAG and bring back a well-formed answer for a very complex question, it's now more possible to learn things at a rapid speed than ever before. And what it really comes down to is, what is your desire? What are you trying to learn? What are you trying to do? If you can put yourself in a good position to have the vision and decide what you want to do, there's never been a better time to get started. And it's really just a matter of getting out there and making some AI mistakes. We cover AI mistakes in so many different ways on the channel. My favorite, of course, is helping you all get started and not being afraid of making those growth mistakes, because you're trying to do something new, something that's unfamiliar, where you're really not sure if it's going to work at all. But you just try it to see what's going to happen. And when you try it, it's either going to work or it's not going to work out very well. And you can learn from those situations where it doesn't go together very well. But we'll cover some other things on the channel another time. Listen, there's lots of people out there making mistakes with the way that they're applying these models, the use cases that they're trying and applying. Things don't always work well. And then, of course, there is, where are we going tomorrow? There's a lot of people that are out there and they're very afraid of what's happening. They're not sure what the future is going to bring. And I want to talk about those things, but I also want to have a conversation with you. I'd love to hear from you. If you're enjoying the content that I'm putting out, I'd love to know what you're most interested in. Drop a comment if you're enjoying it. If there's something you have a question about, maybe we can have a conversation about it. I'm just a guy. I'm available. I'm at AI Mistakes. You can find me on the web, on YouTube, on LinkedIn. Hey, let's have a conversation. You never know what might come of it. And I'm here for it, especially in these early days of growing AI Mistakes. There's an opportunity for us to work together, and maybe today is that day. So if you're watching now and you have a question, don't be shy. Send me a direct message. You want to have a conversation? Hey, maybe there's an opportunity to start something new together, either actively or passively. Maybe you're trying to sort out what to do with your own organization in AI. I can probably help you out with that too in a conversation, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a business transaction. I want this to be something that's exciting and interesting for everyone that's involved, and now is the time to do it. So I hope you're really enjoying the content. Let me hear from you. Check out the other videos on the channel on YouTube, and say hi on social media. And until next week, go make some AI mistakes. We'll see you around.